listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, calls for an urgent review of childcare centre regulations amid horrifying new allegations against a childcare worker in Melbourne. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Tuesday, the 1st of July. At least 5 million people are in the path of an intense weather system hitting the coast of New South Wales with torrential rain and gale force winds. The Bureau of Meteorology has called it a vigorous coastal low, which is set to see more than 200 millimetres of rain fall in some areas and winds of up to 125 k's an hour. Here is senior meteorologist from the BOM, Gabrielle Woodhouse.
The system is quite dynamic and quite vigorous, and we're expecting conditions to escalate through the afternoon. What this means is that's where we're looking at that wind potential increasing, but also that threat of heavy rainfall increasing. This is most likely for areas across the Illawarra as well as parts of Sydney. This means that we have a greater flash flood risk with potential for some fairly heavy falls to develop over a short period of time.
An entire month's worth of rain is predicted to fall in a number of areas over the next few hours, including around Armidale and then further south along the New South Wales coast around Nowra and Batemans Bay. A number of evacuation centres have already been set up, with affected residents warned to stay indoors. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will fly to Washington in the US to meet with President Donald Trump next week as the ceasefire between Israel and Iran continues to hold. There is growing speculation the new meeting between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister may indicate a new ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Meantime, the US dollar has hit a record low as Mr. Trump's global trade war continues. Since January, the US dollar has fallen by more than 10% to its lowest performance over the first 6 months of the year in more than 50 years. And the maker of 2 major sunscreen brands is under fire for allegedly misleading consumers over being reef-friendly. The ACCC alleges the sunscreen owner Edgewell engaged in greenwashing by making claims about the environmental benefits of Hawaiian Tropic and Banana Boat sunscreens that it had no reasonable or scientific basis to make. Before we begin our deep dive, a warning that this discussion contains descriptions of alleged child sex abuse that may be confronting for some listeners. A 26-year-old man has been charged with 70 sexual offences, including rape relating to his work at an early learning centre in Melbourne. He also worked at 19 other childcare centres. More than 1,200 families have now been urged to test their children for infectious diseases. Here is the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen speaking at a special news conference earlier today.
I'm sickened by these allegations of abuse. They are shocking and distressing, and my heart just breaks for the families who are living every parent's worst nightmare.
Joining us today is Bravehearts Founder and child safety advocate Hetty Johnston. Hetty, thanks so much for joining us. What police allege happened in Melbourne, these new allegations are truly horrific.
They really are horrific, and they're worse than ever before. I've never heard anything like this. You know, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, the allegation that there could be some sort of disease that has been spread by this man amongst those children is just unbelievable. And I just feel my heart just bleeds for those parents and those children.
Hetty, you've been a very passionate campaigner for child protection. There's been many questions asked over many years. Are there enough safeguards in place for childcare centres and facilities? Do you believe there are enough safeguards and checks in place?
No, I absolutely don't. I just don't think we're taking it seriously enough. The training that's out there is ad hoc and high level. I mean, it's really not great. So the staff are not really understanding lots of things. They don't understand what to look for, what the red flags are in the children's behaviour, but also in the adults' behaviour. They don't understand the depth and the seriousness of their personal responsibility in a childcare centre to help children stay safe. And the fact that Offenders can't offend unless they are out of sight of another adult or anyone that can, see them and catch them out. So clearly, on all of these occasions, with all of these children, it is alleged that this person has been able to isolate children from anybody else. It just shouldn't have happened. It just simply shouldn't have happened.
Hetty, these allegations, and we have to be incredibly careful because this matter is now before the court, but there have been other cases more recently also and allegations in Australia of other childcare workers facing pretty serious charges and allegations. Unfortunately, these cases that are popping up and allegations don't seem to be isolated. And in 2025, how is this allegedly occurring?
No, they're not isolated. They're everywhere. And it's not just childcare. It's in schools. It's absolutely everywhere. Well, we're just not responding as a nation, and as our governments are just not taking this seriously enough. I mean, we don't have proper audits. We're not making sure that staff are properly trained. We're not ensuring organisations are both compliant and competent to protect children. And yet their role is to look after the country's future, the country's most vulnerable citizens, children, and yet we treat it like it's not that important, when really it is one of the most important jobs anybody can do, is not just to care for and play with these children, but to make sure they're safe and understand what's happening not only in the childcare centre, but when the children come in from home, they have to be able to understand what sexual abuse and what abuse is and what it looks like for children, what to look for, how to identify it, both in the childcare centre, but also in the children that are coming in from their home where most of the abuse happens. And none of that is happening anywhere. It's just incredibly frustrating. After 30 years, I feel like I'm still saying the same thing over and over and over again.
So, Hetty, what would you like to happen? What needs to happen? These are all the important questions everyone is asking at the moment. What needs to happen to ensure these vulnerable children in these circumstances are not allegedly sexually abused?
Okay, so after almost 30 years at Bravehearts, when I left, I went to work for an insurance company that offer insurance to childcare centres and to other sectors that that need this insurance in order to get their funding against the sexual assault. The risk is very, very high, so therefore most of the insurers left the market. So I went there, worked for them and created their risk assessment, which answers that question you're asking, Natasha. How does an insurance company manage this risk? It's huge. Government aren't managing it. And we've had 3 royal commissions in children, aged care and disability. How do they manage it? And the answer is to share the risk back with those organisations. That is to make sure those childcare centres and others, schools, everyone else, have the right training. Their staff have the right training. Their board understand their responsibilities, that they are both compliant and competent in what they're doing. And they have to now demonstrate that to get this insurance. So really, it's the insurance sector doing government jobs. What needs to happen? So I've done all this now, and I've done it with Bond University. It's being launched on the 7th of July in Brisbane, because I am so frustrated that after 30 years, we haven't actually grasped this and said, this is what people need to know. Here it is. Doesn't matter if you work in a childcare centre, a school or aged care facility. The statistics are horrible around sexual assault right across the sectors. Every person working in a childcare centre should be doing this training or something very similar to it. It's not a light touch. This is what everybody needs to know. It's what all parents need to know. It's what everybody who cares for or interacts with vulnerable children or adults need to know, Natasha. And if we all just did this very simple, very accessible training, then children would be so much safer. People would understand this issue. They're just not getting it, and they're not getting their important role in it, from the boardroom table to the coalface on the childcare floor. Everybody needs to understand how sex offenders operate, how they get away with it. They need to understand everything about what goes on here, because there is just so much at stake. We can't just do a light touch. We have to do it properly.
Hetty, where do you think the action needs to come from? You've made some great points in the concept that these centres have to take responsibility, but is there also a greater need for federal legislation and also more checks and balances? Because one may argue currently what we are doing is not working.
Obviously, what we're doing is not working, though, Natasha, because it's not stopping. It's almost like every week we've got something else. Government are doing a good job. They're putting stuff in place. They're trying. But, part of the problem is it's just so slow. And systems inside government are so precious about how we do things around here. There's a real resistance to change. In my view, there should only be one safeguarding commission, Australian Safeguarding Commission, one set of safeguarding governance rules that everybody should do. The same thing, consistent across the country, transferable skills across the country, no silos, no commission for aged care, commission for this, commission for that, just one. Because when I worked at the insurance company and rewrote their whole risk framework, I found that the risk for vulnerable people, whether they be children, aged care or disability, didn't matter. The governance safeguarding risks are exactly the same. The modus operandi of offenders, exactly the same. And the standards and principles basically all said the same thing, but they use different language. So this single, as I understand it, the only ANSFAR insurance, the only insurance provider of this necessity of PSA insurance, physical sexual abuse insurance, uses that one framework to measure every organisation and institution that needs this insurance and comes to them for it. They will measure those organisations to make sure that they only offer insurance to organisations who are taking safeguarding seriously. That is, that they meet the requirements of that framework. That means they have to do this training or something very, very similar to it, and they need to demonstrate that they've put their policies in place, that they're walking the talk of those, or that they're trying very hard to make it happen. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of the insurance company because I know zero about insurance, but I do know about risk, and I do understand, because I wrote that, I know how they're applying it.
Hetty, in regards to, we know that there's certain, across the industry, working with children checks, there's policies in many centres that not one childcare worker is allowed to be alone with a child at a time. How does this happen? How do these alleged cases of sexual abuse happen? That is what every parent is asking.
And it's a really good question, and the answer is it shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen. The rules are there. The rules are being breached. And I say again, I don't know that they willingly breach these rules. I hope not. But I just don't think the staff are well enough trained, or the management or the owners of these organisations, to understand the ramifications of what happens when those rules are breached. Not only, Natasha, to the children and to their families, but to the individual workers and to the organisations, criminally, civilly, reputationally. Everything goes west for the organisation, or south. It's just gone.
We really appreciate you joining us today. It's such an important conversation to have. We need to protect our children at all costs. Hetty, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
That was Bravehearts founder and child safety advocate, Hetty Johnston. If this conversation raised any issues for you, you can call 1-800-RESPECT. That number is 1-800-737-732. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.